the program coordinator at Global Environments Network. Thank you for joining us. I'll start off with a quick introduction about Global Diversity Foundation and Global Environments Network, who's hosting the event today, before I pass on over to our moderator, Rachel. So a bit about us. Of course, we know that life on Earth is facing so many challenges which have brought us to this crisis point. This includes biodiversity loss and climate change, inequality, injustice, and poverty. And we know deep down that all of these challenges are rooted in the alienation of humans and nature. And these challenges are interconnected, interwoven, interdependent, and they can't be resolved singularly. And our work holds this complexity. So we're a multidisciplinary team of experts, facilitators. Our team includes activists, anthropologists, artists, biologists, community organizers, economists, farmers, healers, storytellers, strategists, and we're all working together to try and activate the power and potential of those who want to make change. We nurture and support change makers who are operating at all scales across different boundaries and differences to find long-term solutions to these challenges. And collectively, Global Diversity Foundation has over 20 years of experience in implementing these programs, which empower communities and regenerate biocultural diversity. So through our global network, which has more than 600 leaders who are operating at the front lines of systemic change, we work on mentoring and supporting and resourcing them to make their visions a reality. We incubate the most promising ideas through intensive and embedded support. And our efforts result in stories of transformation and practical experiences of real alternatives to the myopic status quo. And that is what's brought us to organize the event that you've joined today. Before we really dig in, I've just got a few technical points to mention. So the event today is being recorded. If you do not consent to being featured in the video, please feel free to contact me and we'll be happy to edit it, the video, which will be, inshallah, available in the new year. If you feel comfortable with it, we'd love if you could have your camera on so we can see everyone's gorgeous faces. It makes things a little bit more personal. And you're welcome to change between gallery view and speaker view as you wish. If you'd like to, please rename yourself and your preferred pronouns, and enter into the chat where you're signing into from today, which country you're in, which city you're in. Of course, all of this is optional. We'd ask you to please keep yourself on mute and use the Zoom chat. And you can use that for any comments and questions. And I can collect questions which we can have in the Q&A at the end. And you're also welcome to message me privately. So there are closed captions available, which are available through, there are some settings at the bottom. And there will be a 5-minute access break at about an hour from now. And also to let you know, the event is scheduled for 2 hours. And let's see how it goes with the question and answers, and depending on the depth of our conversation. So I'll now hand over to our moderator, Rachel Knight. Thank you.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody. It is such a pleasure to be here. This is a topic that's very close to my heart and my own life. And I was just so thrilled when the Global Diversity Foundation reached out and said, let's do this. So it's a real honor and a pleasure to be moderating this conversation with truly amazing panelists. And we've been having some conversations in preparation for this event, and I can tell you they've been absolutely fascinating dialogues that I'm so grateful to be able to share with you guys today. First, a quick bit of introduction about me, and then the speakers will introduce themselves. I am a land rights lawyer. I protect indigenous and customary land rights around the world. I spent 15 years working in hundreds of villages and communities, mostly in Africa and Asia, helping them formalize their indigenous and customary land rights. And along the way, I realized that the law is really not the only answer, and that rights only go so far enough. And that it's really that there have been centuries of erosion of culture and spirituality that have impacted how people treat and think about their lands. And so I started to get really involved with the idea of sacred land, sacred sites, rites of passage, cultural transmission. And part of that has to do with my own work here in California with a group of women from my own cultural and ethnic background to revive rites of passage for young women in our community. So for the past 12 years, I've been supporting young women's rites of passage here in California. So that's a quick introduction about me. I'm going to hand it over to, how about Dr. Karambu? Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Rachel. It's wonderful to be here. My name is Dr. Karambu Ringera. I am zooming in from Kenya. I am the founder and president of an organization known as International Peace Initiatives, and we work to mitigate the impact of disease like HIV and AIDS, poverty and violence, as these affect the lives of young people and women in our communities. It is wonderful to be here, and welcome everyone.
And how about Max? Why don't you go next?
Evening, everyone. Really lovely to see all your faces and see such a good turnout. Yeah, my name is Max, and I'm zooming in from London, England, and I'm the founder and director of an organisation called The Visionaries. And we are working in London and the southeast of the UK with young people and schools and young people's communities, exploring how can we support a healthy transition into adulthood in a community and eco-centric way that really supports a shift in the narrative by which young people are indoctrinated. And for us, Rites of Passage informs all of our work, so it feels really exciting to be exploring a topic that I nerd out on all the time. So good to be here.
Thank you, Max. Hugo, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Shira Pakapakuin Suuvi. Suteji Huko, co-founder and chief advisor of the Indigenous Taiwan Self-Determination Alliance, based in Pungsunutau, now called Orchid Island. Historically connected with the Batanese Islands of Philippines, and it belongs to Taiwan only after 1895 under the Japanese colonial government. Now it's 1 a.m. here. Yes, I am a night person seasonally when we are harvesting the flying fishes. Also, when we launch a new boat, the celebration after the ceremony will be singing in exchange between the host and the guests from sunset to sunrise. Ayoi.
Thank you so much, Hugo. I had no idea it was 1 a.m. What an honor to have you with us. Wow. And Naomi, go ahead, introduce yourself. You're on mute. Oh, there you go.
Hello, everyone. My name is Naomi. I'm calling in from Kenya. I am the founder of an organization called Ubuntu Voices that works with young people from all walks of life and in Africa. And I also am a co-founder of an organization called Kila.
Naomi, can you hear us? You're frozen. The signal is maybe bad. Huh. Okay. Can you hear us, Naomi? Maybe take your video off. Oh, we've lost her. Okay, well, when she comes back, we will give her a moment to introduce herself.
Sorry, everyone. I'm back.
Oh, good, you're back. Good.
I'll reintroduce myself again.
Yes,
As I was
please.
saying, my name is Naomi from Kenya, and I am a founder of an organization called Ubuntu Voices that works with young people from all walks of life in Africa. And I am also a co-founder of an initiative called Kila Dada Initiative. And Kila Dada is a Swahili word that means every sister. And we work with young women in rural communities to distribute reusable sanitary towels and as well empower them to discover the woman that they are growing to be and bringing in new ways of rites of passage. And I'm happy to be here and happy to see all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Naomi. Okay, we're going to move now into the main content of our discussion. And we're going to start by, I want to start by asking each of you to tell us a bit about your own rites of passage journey, if you have actually been initiated, if you went through a rite of passage, and also the work you do to initiate young people into adulthood or adults into elderhood. And I just want to preface this question by speaking aloud what I think many people on this call may feel in their hearts, which is, as someone personally who was not initiated, who never went through a rite of passage, I have a huge amount of grief around that. It's really painful to me that I had to muddle through from childhood into adulthood and be initiated by life rather than by a group of extraordinary women and elders who held me and honored me as I passed from childhood into womanhood. And so I just want to presence that there may be people on this call who have a lot of sadness around the fact that this wasn't something in their lives. So yeah, let's start maybe, I'll let you decide who wants to jump in. Please, so talk about your own rite of passage and the work you do currently to help young people in their initiation processes.
I will go first. My name is Karambu, like I said, and I grew up at a time that female genital mutilation was a part of a girl's life, but my mom protected us from it. And so I didn't go through that kind of rite of passage. But I remember when we closed school in December, very many girls would go through the process. And when we went back to school, I always wondered at how they looked changed. And there was a change even in their eyes. And I used to wonder, what happened to these girls? And more often than not, many of them would drop out of school and get married. So I really don't miss that part of I didn't get initiated that way because I didn't want to go through that process. And so for me, my life, my rites of passage journey has been my life's experiences. And I'll share just one. And it's a tough thing that happened in my life. And because of the naming and the marking that came with it, I went through a very dark time trying to understand whether it was my fault or why that thing happened. And I used to have dreams about this wound that I had on my foot, on my leg. And the wound looked very bad. And one day I just decided that I'm going to open it up and see what it was. And when I opened the very dirty looking bandage, I had no wound. I was okay. And for years, at least 2 years, I had been dreaming that I had this wound. And I understood that it was the naming and the marking of the community that I had internalized. And so in opening the wound and finding that I was okay, I learned that I am able to heal myself. And it is from that learning that I understood that I needed to find who I am, and I needed to step on a journey of self-knowing outside of the markings of the society. And so today, I am part of organizing alternative rites of passage for girls. Because for me, a rite of passage is a passing through a threshold into adulthood. But the question is, what kind of adults do I want the girls to be? What kind of adult? What are the values that define an adult, a person who's passed from girlhood to womanhood? And I think that is something that we're going to answer as we continue this conversation. So at least that's my journey. It was in finding who I am through initiation from a life experience that totally changed my life. Thank you.
That was so beautiful, Dr. Karambu. But can you tell us a little bit, before we pass the mic on, can you tell us a little bit more about the details of the rites of passage that you lead for young women?
The process is a 2 weeks event, and the girls are taken to a special place, and we invite different speakers to come and speak to them about their own experiences growing up as girls. So the sharing is about the fact that they didn't go through the FGM. They talk about the dangers of female genital mutilation, FGM, circumcision, girl circumcision. They have the girls understand why we choose the alternative rite of passage other than female genital mutilation. And then we talk about what it means to be a woman. And for me, the danger here is in the old way of talking about rites of passage and ministering them, the kids are taught how to conform to the systems, to be how a woman is defined within the society. And in the alternative rites of passage, we talk about there is the expectation of a society in terms of what the role of a woman is. However, the main question is, who do you want to be? What do you want to contribute in society? So instead of working with kids or teaching kids how to conform to be a certain way, we work with them to really understand who they are and to define who they want to be from their own words, and then how they choose to live their lives moving forward from there. 2 weeks is a long time, so I can't tell you everything that happens there because we'll be here the whole time and no one else will speak. So I'll leave it there.
And just to push you a little bit more, is there time, you said there's time on the land where they're by themselves in nature? I just want to bring that piece out.
Oh, yeah. So the part of the 2 weeks is they are in a special house, and then there are 2 days that they go out on their own in nature, and there are certain things that we ask them to listen to or to think about. And because they have only water, it's like a semi-fasting kind of time alone in nature, and it is a time of working to work with one's fears and to find out how, when you're in that kind of space on your own, you're going to speak with yourself and with your God and with everything in nature to really find who you are in this space. So yeah, there is solo time that the girls go and be with themselves and just figure some things out. So yeah.
Beautiful, thank you. Who would like to go next?
think I'd like to go next and just build up on what Dr. Karambo has talked about. And I'm so amazed, and she's from Kenya and I'm from Kenya, and she had her own rites of passage in the olden days. And I, as a young person who is in this generation, has never had a rites of passage, and I've never known what a rite of passage really means. I only grew up knowing that my rites of passage is when I get my menses, and from then I'm now becoming a woman, and I need to know all about how I can take care of myself during that period of time. But I was lucky enough to have an opportunity to experience a rites of passage outside my own hometown, outside my own country. And I went to this amazing group of young people from all walks of life in the United States, and they had their own unique way of doing rites of passage. And for me to be exposed in something new that I've never ever been exposed to before in my own community and culture, I was able to fully find who I am as a woman. How am I naming myself? And I came back home so surprised and tried to bring these tools that I learned about I as a woman stepping into adulthood to show my other women that are stepping together with me into the adulthood what I learned. And none of them really got what I was saying or what I was doing. They thought it was bizarre, it was something crazy. And for me to just have that opportunity to experience my own way of the rites of passage, the one that I choose and I'm not being forced to do, was a beautiful thing that I could ever imagine in my life. And here in Kenya, most of the girls right now in different communities are also longing for that. They're longing for a rites of passage that is not harmful to them. It's not stressful. It's not even being forced. Just a rite of passage to celebrate what our body is emerging to become and what we are feeling as women. You know, I can't talk for men because I don't know what happens during the rites of passage, but as a woman, I'm feeling amazed to even hear Dr. Karambo's story, and I would really like to see something like that happening to us right now. We are taken in a room, we talk about, you know, girls or women, things that we need to prepare ourselves in the future, and given the opportunity to voice up, because I live in a patriarchy society and women don't really have the voice to share what they really believe in. And if we are given that opportunity to just be ourselves for 2 weeks, I know things will really, really emerge that we are not even aware of. And so I think for me, rites of passage should be, and in my own version, I believe it should be something that is not forced at all, something that is to be embraced, something that should be celebrated in a form of finding and owning the power that we have within us that we have never thought about. And yeah, thank you, Dr. Karambo, for that beautiful sharing. Thank you.
Naomi, I want to push you a little bit. Tell us about the work you're doing with young people. What are the rites of passage programs that you're crafting and offering?
So what I'm doing with young people in the rural communities is to go, you know, in Kenya, in the cities, women are more educated and at least they know what they want and they go for what they really stand for. But in the rural communities, women are not even exposed to anything at all. They are only taught about being a woman. You need to stay in the house, you need to cook for your husband, you need to give birth to as many kids as you can. And there's nothing more they know beyond that. And so for me and my partners to go into these rural communities and tell the women there's more beyond what is happening inside the homestead, what is happening in the home that you really are taught to be as a woman. There's more of you to go out there, even look for a job, work, earn money, and come back home, support your husband in supporting the family. And so for me to always bring an awareness of what is happening and exposing them to different skills that I have learned. And right now we are working with young women to see if we can bring soap making experiences to them, something that can help them get out of the house, go and mingle with other women from different communities and hear the stories from these women in the communities. And these are two different types of women, the rural and city women. And so bringing these women together, there's always a disagreement that happens because the city women feel more empowered, and they feel like the rural women are more, they're more not even down to earth. They don't know what they really want in life. But for me, that is not the way that I want to see young girls in the rural community grow, knowing that their life evolves around marriage, giving birth, taking care of the house and not going anywhere, but it evolves around going out there and finding what is my purpose, what can I do beyond the house choices that I have. And most of these exercises are taking women into a new place that they have never seen before, and telling them to stay there for a day and see what emerges for them. And they totally come back changed. And especially when you go through talking about menses and how can you celebrate that menstrual period that you have, instead of sitting in the house and saying, I'm not going to church because I have my menses, that's a taboo. Who said it's a taboo if you go to church when you're having your menses? You need to be free with that. You need to feel that's what you are given by God and the divine being, and you need to embrace it. And so we are working to make women go out there and fully live their lives. And so all these norms that we are taught from our mothers, from our societies, from our communities, is what we're trying to eradicate.
Thank you. Hugo, Max, who would like to go next?
Yes, but our story is totally different, but it's wonderful to hear our sister from Africa. I'm born in the 1950s, so we are the generation that break up with our tradition, but we are also the generation to restore it, to revive it. So in my case, that my life is so I always I say the meaning of a huku is means board in the top in our language. So I'm fortunate to be guided by our ancestor spirits to go a pilgrimage of a drop out and the drop in. So we are the first generation to have a mass education. And because of this, we break up with our tradition. I will introduce our tradition, our beautiful tradition later. And then I'm also very soon, because from my childhood or something, we are still the generation that we have heard the storytelling of our elders, of our grandparents, of our including our parents. So this is by the grieveness and the sadness that in this generation, when in the tradition of Tao people, that when you are turned 11 or 12, you are accompanying the elders, the parents, the neighbors, go to the field, go to the forest. If I say in the case of boy that you go with the elders to the forest to look for the right timbers for boat building, because this is an island and a marine interior people. And then when you are turned 15 or 16, you will be the first time you will be helped by your father and your uncles and some others that help you to build your first board, small board of a double paddle. And so for into Taiwan, that for the especially for the Tao people, the passage is a process of learning that is cultivated in the living tradition of the people. And the most important that I would say that the building of the boat it is because this is a plank board. This is quite complex, and this is a beautiful tradition for thousands. I cannot share. I have not prepared the picture for you, but the important is there is a lot of technical things. When you are you begin to accompany with the adults group, yeah, you are just accompanying, observing, and to be a detour assistant. But then now you are the master of your own board. So first time, most thing you should decide yourself with the help advice of your elders. You should do most of the things yourself. And most important, this double side that the build of the board need about a half a year, but the preparation for the launching ceremony is starting from 2 years before. This is your mother, your mother with growing taro and yam, the recipe, and your father will raise goat in addition, just to make a good ceremony, successful ceremony, and also with a big feast for the community. And this is two things. First is you will be reintroduced to the people of the community. Now, yeah, you are somebody, and now you have your own board. You are going to join the adult group. Actually, you join the fishing group, and also the board is beautifully carving, decorated, and painted, and with the ceremony, with the that is, we say that this is to impress the spirits of the seas. They will remember you. Now, yeah, this boy it turned into the adults group. Now he will go to the sea, to fishing, to feed his own, to build his own family, and feed their people. Yeah, so two things. The environment, the beings in the environment will remember you, will recognize you again. Now you are somebody. So for us, that very important that when you are the main character, now you know the real meaning to be, I say, the embeddedness and the connectedness. So you to be a boy or to be a girl or to be a man or to be a woman is defined by your tradition and also where you are being. So in the, I say, the interspecies habitats. So this is different for island people, forest people, and coastal people in Taiwan. Because Taiwan is a small island, but with a very high culture and the biological diversity, including language diversity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hugo. I actually am surprised to find myself so moved by what you're saying. And I also want to just urge anyone to Google the English name for Hugo's island is called Orchid Island. And if you Google Tau boats, they're startlingly complex and shot like astonishingly beautiful. So just so you can get a quick image of what he's talking about. Hugo, do you do any work? Maybe you could just talk very quickly about the work you do to help initiate young people today.
Because when I say, when you are 11 or 12, maybe you're still in the primary school or just going to the junior high school. And I have only completed my junior high school. Then I'm 15. Then I go to Taiwan as an unskilled worker. This is a trend. This is everybody go there because now even the elders see that yes, our tradition is meaningless in the modern life. So by the colonization, modernization, and also is, I say, post-colonial, post-modern, and the post-tradition, because the tradition is collapsing or being abandoned because the generation, this generation, go out, to move out, to break up with the, but we are also the ones who find them. So this is not when we are 15, but people will be that they are both 40, 50. Even somebody, when they are retired from an urban job, then go back to the island, when 60, they still do it. And also more and more, that because the tradition is still there, the elder is still there, so the technique is not gone. So that's why that we still can actually, very unfortunate that we forget our way of building our traditional eco housing. But the boat building is still there, because maybe because it's more practical, and in the recent decade, it also is for the young people. They come back to use this as a culture and the eco cultural tourism. So now they are eager to read, and also then the same process again. You go to your forest, you go to know the interspecies, what is the connection between the forest and the sea, and what is the meaning to be a Tao people. So we starting from keep the border building group, and the fishing group become a group by different community. We have a sick community. They have a common group to do the tourism, to have a meeting. This is a youth action group. They are organized to, and advised by the elder, to keep the taboo, what you can do, what you cannot do, and when you can do it. And yes, we have discussed a lot about what is taboo. Taboo is not only that what you are prohibited. It is just, I think this is a culture design, is a life design of people in a very unique natural environment. Yeah, more data. Thank you.
Thank you. Max, go ahead.
Great, thank you. Oh, it's just so nice to listen to everyone. Oh. So I grew up in London, and from quite what I see as quite a spiritually impoverished upbringing, and very multicultural upbringing, and really my attempts at initiating myself, and I call them attempts because they weren't successful or particularly well thought out in my teenage years, were entirely self-created, and the only formal, what I would now look back at as rites of passage, were quite tokenistic, like graduation ceremonies, and particularly to do with education, and really about I was very much trying to initiate myself into the mainstream. What I'd been told was what it meant to be an adult, which was to have a successful career and earn lots of money, and have a house and kids and all the kind of markers of being adult. And it was really when I found myself doing a social innovation fellowship, where I really found a community, and because I think the community for me was the piece that was really missing in my formative years, around being able to ask these questions with real elders and real mentors, around what is the meaning and purpose of my life. I found myself being invited up to the mountains in the Lake District with a small group, where we supported each other to go out onto the land and spend 24 hours, as Dr. Karambu has been talking, similar to go and spend 24 hours fasting in the wild, as wild as England permits, and then returning into community and sharing the stories of that time. And it was up until that time, for me, nature was something outside of myself and something to be, a resource to be used for human benefits. And it was really that week and that moment of just communing with cows and beetles and becoming the sky and becoming water, and all of these deeply profound moments where I started to realize what the power of intention and the power of questing for a vision, as the First Nations in North America would call it, going out on a vision quest. And for me, it was one of those deeply insightful moments where I'd already been working with young people and already been working in education, and always felt like I was longing for something more out of what my life could mean and could involve. And so just this practice of preparing and separating, in a very traditional, what has become known as a very traditional rites of passage process of separating ourselves from the community, going into a liminal space where we're asking ourselves important questions about ourselves and what we want of our lives, what are we letting go of. In my case, that involved a lot of self-generated ceremony. As I said, I didn't grow up with a faith or a particular religion or spiritual traditions. So for me, the process of becoming adult was actually about refinding my indigeneity to this land in England, and refinding my relationship to the rest of the living world. And for me, the initiation really was that shift from quite self-interest, if I'm going to be honest, like quite self-interested motives, to suddenly, really seeing beyond myself and acting in service. Now, that I think for me is a really key psychological shift of what it means to go from child to adult. So I found myself deeply inspired by. I've then since explored this practice of fasting in nature in lots of different forms. I've journeyed with the School of Lost Borders in Colorado, who do absolutely incredible work if you don't know them. And they're not the only ones to be inspired by vision fasting and applying that practice to modern times, because we do live in very multicultural settings. So this, for me, there's something, and I'll come on to this when it comes to my work, but something very powerful about helping people find their own rituals and their own ceremonies and their own ways of meeting the land on which they live, and the community with whom they surround themselves. And then for me, I guess the community has also been, in these journeys, I've made communities. There hasn't been a home community to which I've returned. It's always been communities that I've journeyed and quested with that have been my safety net and my holders, and those to whom I've shared my story and have witnessed me. And so that's been my own personal journey with initiatory practices. I'm interested to it's been wonderful to hear that all the different, we all have our own journeys with that. And I think in modern times, it's really, it's so needed as a shift from this individual narrative that we have to really looking at things more holistically, more from the community perspective. And so yeah, so in terms of how that informs what I now do with young people, for me, it's a big part of our work is really supporting the adults around the young people to be that holding community. One of my great mentors, Dr. David Blumenkrantz, who's been doing this kind of work for 50 odd years and written many books about it. I'll share his details afterwards, but he always said to me, you can only bring someone as far as you've gone yourself. So if you have only, if the adults aren't initiated, then how can we ever expect them to hold young people through practice? And so for me, a big part of what we do with the Visionaries is working with the adults in a community around a young person to think about how they can also go on their own journey of deepening their own inner awareness, systemic awareness, and questioning what is the story we're living by, because fundamentally I think just that asking ourselves that question and having a space where young people and adults are sharing side by side feels really, really key. Rites of Passage have always been about reciprocity and relationship. It's never been about the transformation of a child into an adult or an adult into an elder. It's about, well, yes, it's about that, but it's also about what are we learning in the other direction, and how are we all growing through this experience? Like, what are the adults learning from the child? There's such wisdom in youth that we forget or we don't celebrate. So for us, it's a lot about shifting the conversation we're having about education and and using Rites of Passage as a story that helps to really frame what education is really all about, because I think Rites of Passage were the very first form of education we had was these Rites of Passage processes, which obviously look very different depending on where you are in the world.
Thank you, Max. That's such a great introduction to the next question. I noticed that we're running quite late on time, so let's try to be really quicker in these next questions, I guess. The next question I have for all of you is, in your opinion, what is the necessary content versus the form of a powerful rite of passage? Like, what causes the transformation for youth? And Max had talked, one of the aspects in sort of the more like codified elements of a rite of passage is you come home to a community that receives you and holds you to your initiated state. And to me, this question is really important and personal. In my own culture, we used to have quite extensive rites of passage that are now sort of just diluted to a party, where you have a party, you get celebrated, people give you lots of gifts, and there's no actual transformation. And I have friends and colleagues in South Africa who said, that same thing happened to us. Like, we used to have these really long rites of passage that are now just like a big party and you get gifts and that's it. And one of the saddest stories I heard were from my friends and colleagues in Liberia. I worked in Liberia for over a decade. And there were people there, women who told me that even a generation ago, it would be 2 years. You'd go into the forest for 2 years with women and you'd learn how to make bark cloth so you could, make fabric for your family's clothing, and you learn how to build a hut, and you'd learn how to go into the forest and gather all the herbs you needed to make every medicine you'd need to heal your children. And you'd learn all the magical spiritual things, and you'd learn everything. And then it would culminate in female genital mutilation as the ultimate experience of pain and pain tolerance. And then nowadays, even women, because a lot of Liberians are refugees in the United States, a lot of women will fly in from the US to Liberia, just have the FGM for 2 weeks and then go home again. And so you have there a really sort of tragic dilution and diminishment of the real parts of the rite of passage that really prepare you to be an adult. Personally, the rite of passage that I'm involved with, it's 18 months of sitting in ceremony once a month with a fire and learning all these life skills. And then it culminates in 3 days in fasting on the land. But the fasting on the land is not the important part. It's the 18 months of learning together and being taught skills and doing the psychological work that then prepares you for this ultimate time on the land. I also just want to pull out that in all of your answers to the first question, what you're talking a lot about is what Hugo said, is the embeddedness and connectedness of being part of an ecosystem, and being on the land is what causes that. Dr. Karambru, Max, and Naomi all spoke about that. So I want to ask your opinion, like, what is it that is the most critical part, the content versus the form of a powerful rite of passage? Like, what elements of rites of passage truly support young people to transform into mature, competent adults, or for adults to become wise elders? And if we don't have adults who have been initiated, what do you do with youth who've gone out and had these transformative experiences and come back to a community of adults who are really actually just large adolescents? So I will, I'll pass it over to the panelists to answer that. All right, I'll Dr. Karambu, why don't you go ahead?
I didn't want to go fast again, so I was giving everybody else a chance, but it's fine, it's okay. Thank you everyone for that sharing. It is very powerful. And when Max shared during one of our preparatory meetings and said, and defined what the rites of passage in the West look like, I was rather surprised. I was like, oh my gosh, a driver's license? And that got me thinking, and leading me to this question of, so what really causes the transformation? And I really don't have an aha moment answer to give all of you, because I'm just going to speak from my own experience. And remember, I didn't get FGM'd, so I don't know about that rite of passage. And because my mom also didn't have an alternative rite of passage for us when she decided that we were not going to go the FGM route, for me it was then my life experience that is the most difficult thing that happened in my life, that was connected to my being woman, and that got me thinking about, if this is what society does in its effort to bring me to a place of conforming to the system, and what then? Where then do I find myself? And so in that journey of trying to find myself in this place that was so, I hadn't gotten to a place of finding that community that Max talked about, because in this transition to becoming woman, there is the holding of the other women who really are the ones that talk to girls so that they can agree to go the FGM way, without really telling them what it is all about and what it entails in terms of the cutting, the pain, why the blood, and why some of the girls have to die in the process. So in the beginning, it was a solo journey, but as I grew and matured into my search, then I found a community of people that I could walk this journey with. So for me, what caused the most transformation is the stories that the women shared about what built the most strength in them. Because, you know, then the life question that I started asking is, what is this life about? Why do we do rites of passages? Just to conform, just to be like, yeah, we take this as a community, we circumcise girls, that is it, without looking at the implications and the impact it has on the life of that girl. And so for me, the question was then to ask, what is this life about? Why did I come here? And it is in answering that question, not according to the markings of the people, it's from the stories that I was told that enabled me to see or to understand the kind of girl I wanted to be. My grandmother used to tell us so many stories about Gashororiga and the girls in the village and all that stuff. And the stories were beautiful. I wanted to be like a Gashororiga. And the process for me was not about not having that tradition of bringing maturity to a girl, but it was in the way that it was done. So for me, the journey has been finding who I am, understanding the systems and how they have marked me, and finding my voice to answer what kind of woman I want to be in my family and in this world, in the things that I do. So I know I haven't answered your question, but for me, the journey became personal. My journey became personal, and it also became political, because in finding who I am, I found a voice and agency to stand up and say, this is not working for me. I'm not going to allow this to happen to my girls. And therefore, this is the alternative that I'm giving and why I am giving it. And so that is where I'm going to leave it. But before I leave it, there's also the aspect of the values. What are the values that I am inculcating in these girls then? And because in the work we've been reclaiming these kinds of societal wastelands, I made reclaim an acronym so that it turned out to be, it is taking responsibility, it is building my empoweredness, because empowerment is what someone does for me. It is living my courage, harnessing my love and light, divine love and light, dancing with life, recognizing I'm love and light, and not the fear that the society has inculcated in its systems. And lastly, that I have to be mindful how I live my life. I have to be present in my life now. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. You did answer my question. I think the inculcation of such magnificent values is indeed a core aspect of the rite of passage. What else, you guys? Tell me, to you, what are what causes the transformation? What is the necessary content of a rite of passage?
Well, I'm just thinking of all of the young people that I work with growing up in London who, you know, some of them live about 20 minutes from the Thames River and have never been there. And so many of them have never left the city. And, you know, we grow up, we live increasingly urbanized lives. So for me, deep encounters with the wild, or as close to the wild as we can get, feels essential for, you know, any rites of passage, if we're to introduce them and recreate them now. Yeah, it just feels like without that, you know, rites of passage or initiation is about exploring the story by which we live, and is normally about more, you know, gaining a deeper understanding of our ancestry. What is it, you know, as Dr. Karambu was saying about the values and ethics and the behaviors of what it means to be an adult, and expectations and your role, and that if that is not wedded to the greater universe story, then I feel deeply worried about any rites of passage that doesn't wed those two stories back together again. So for me, yeah, and just going back to this fasting in nature and going out into the wild, there's every initiation I know of has some adversity in it, some challenge, which, you know, challenge really introduces us to ourselves. It shows us what our strengths are, how we show up when life isn't easy. And, you know, I think we live in a culture that's very addicted to comfort and addicted to making things as easy as possible. So to really intentionally, you know, embrace risk, which I think is something I find quite challenging in our work, particularly bringing it to mainstream, you know, bringing the story of Rites of Passage to mainstream settings where, you know, schools safeguarding and risk and, you know, I run an after school club, gardening club with some children, and even just to get them to go for a walk outside of the school, we have to sign off. You know, I haven't even been able to do it yet because I've got to sign so many papers just to take them on a walk outside of the school gates. So the risk aversion that we have is massive, and rites of passage traditionally have often involved quite a serious risk of death. So I think we need to think about, well, what is the healthy risk taking that you know, young people can take, because they're going to take the risks anyway. They're going to create experiences to, you know, challenging experiences to prove themselves, whether we like it or not. So creating really healthy risk taking feels really important. And, you know, the vision fasting for me is a way of symbolically meeting death and you know, we strip ourselves back of all the things we need to live, and suddenly we're like, okay, can I meet the possibility of death in this moment? And it's often symbolic. It's not, you know, you're not going to die. But
Thank you, Max. I'm reminded of my friend Kabir Vavikate. He said to me, he said, rites of passage are like a practice of facing extreme challenge, so that when you actually, as an adult, face extreme challenge, you know how to handle it. I think what you've spoken to really brings that out. Naomi Hugu, what are your thoughts?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, Hugo, go next.
Okay. Me first. Thank you, Naomi. For me, the key point is I will start the talking from the survival and the revival of our people. So for the Tao people, your family, your fishing group, and your community are embedded in the interspecies habitats and connected to all beings around us. So that's the esoteric kernel of the living knowledge system and the land, sea, ethic, value system to be passed to our youth generation by generation. So that's the content. And then we can, then we taught our youth. Some now they have a good opportunity to have a higher education, and they move, and even they are born in an urban area. So they are being named, called the urban indigenous people. But how can the inter people to be urban, and how can the urban to be indigenous? So we advise them to find your roots to thrive in your homeland, because most of people like me and our group is like this. And when we're talking about survival and revival of the indigenous people, yes, we are tribal activists. And a little more for the Tao tradition, that following you build your first small boat and join the fishing group, the next challenge will be build your first house to shelter your wife and child. And Then you will turn from a sikwa. Sikwa means of a young man, to a shamankwa, means of a father or mother. So for this, I think this is quite universal. If humans steer reproduction, not artificially, but naturally. Yeah. So this is the next step. When the boy, the girl, boy join the fishing group, join the other group, and then you build your family. You got married, and then you have a first child. Then you need a real house, not to live in a hut. So this is the second challenge, and people is like grow like this, and we give such things more than meaning. When you are live in urban, yeah, like me, I go through all these things. I drop in for many uh, many profession or something, and learn many things, modern things. But finally, that how you can find your roots to thrive in your homeland. And then I created the Go the Indigenous Way. Actually, this is for training or initiating the tribal activists of the next generation. So the important thing will be the spiritual power, the materialistic capacity, and the ability to taking strategic action. This is very modern, but this is also part of our group, how to be inter people in a modern world. And then we can, and of course, what I say is this is a common thing, the connectedness, the embeddedness is the common things, because this world is not going this way. And for us, we intuitively, we feel so alienated to the modern industrial civilization that embrace destructed area and protect areas at the same time. This obvious schizophrenia for us. Yeah, more later. Thank you.
Thank you, Hugo. Naomi?
I feel like stories are very, very important. And if we go into our beingness of the life that we are living right now in the modern times and forget about the olden times and not talk about the things that happened there, because maybe, for example, we are not happy about it, or we are ashamed of what happened or what our ancestors were doing. But in that other case, ancestors also had a significant marking in this rites of passage. And there's so many different gems that we can pick from our ancestral rites of passage that they were doing. And if I read the books that I've been reading regarding rites of passage, I sometimes find more of the significances of the activities that was being done in the past, that I can do it in the future and the moment right now on our rites of passage. And if these stories are also mixed with the modern ways of how we want to bring in rites of passage to young people and even adults, we also need to go back into the history or her story of an ancestor talking about their own rites of passage. And in African context, we had a norm of the ancestors pouring a libation on the floor before eating. And that was a way of showing respect. And so if I am going through a rites of passage at this moment right now, how would I want to also honor my ancestors who came up with the rites of passage in my own community and in my own culture? And so for me to bring in this new form of rites of passage to a young person, and speaking on my own level of work and how I've interacted with other young people, is first to look at the roots of our story of from our ancestors of the rites of passage that was being practiced before, and look at the things that we can carry with it ourselves and use it in our modern ways of the rites of passage that we want to bring in. for our own good, for our own safetyness, and then mark and saying, I'm stepping into this beingness of these rites of passage that I feel more secure, I feel more safe, and I'm ending into these rites of passage that maybe brought trauma or anger or discomfort in my life. And in that story that we keep on sharing from our ancestors to the times that we are right now, really shifts a lot of the ways we think about rites of passage. And speaking of that, here in Kenya, if someone hears about rites of passage, the thing that comes in mind, especially for me, the first thing that comes in my mind is the male side, because that is very common in Kenya. And the woman's side is not considered, as there's nothing called rites of passage in a matriarchy society. Rites of passage are only considered in the patriarchy society. And so for me, if I read and see what the ancestors did on the side of the matriarchy society on a rites of passage, there was a celebration, there was the dancing, there was the marking of something new and ending of something that is to be written or to be lived in that age. And so if these stories are brought in, and if we mark our rites of passages through other activities that are more fun, are more engaging, are more liberating, then I feel like my own form of wanting to see a rites of passage in my generation will be totally different, but not also forgetting the generations of my ancestors. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but that is where I am at the moment.
Thank you. It's time for a break, but before we go into the break, I just want to introduce the last question so that people feel excited to come back after the break. I'm going to combine the last question. We had two more, but I'm going to merge them into one. And so the question for the panelists after the break will be, how can we co-design and incubate new kinds of rites of passage that maintain the powerful content our ancestors perfected and that Naomi just spoke about, but in forms more suited to the present? So in your context, how are you transforming or reshaping your ancestral rites of passage in new ways to align with modern ideas and to better serve the situations of today's modern youth? And what advice would you have to people on the call or in other countries or communities who are interested in reviving rites of passage in their own context? So that will be what we talk about after the break. And I also just want to honor Malidoma Somé, who just passed away last week. He wrote an extraordinary book on rites of passage called Of Water and Spirit that is worth reading. And he details very, very profoundly his own rites of passage, which he did as an adult and not as a youth. So we'll take a break. Samira, will you lead us through it? And we'll come back soon.
Yes, of course. Please just stay on the call. Feel free to turn your cameras off and we'll be back in 5 minutes.
That's right. kelela hodonna hodonna neni furu nyonde kelela hodonna ay bangi boloda ne kanna ay bangi boloda kizela ay bangi boloda ne kunna ay bangi boloda ne nyala ne dosu kolobe dimina kune dumbe jaradife ne dumbe nganu fe ne dumbe jarabife ne dumbe nganu ko
Hi again, everyone. If you could please start returning to your computers. Would love if people could turn on their cameras if you're comfortable with it, or if you could write in the chat if you're back, just so we know everybody's present again. And we're, to be sensitive with time, let's just dive right back into it. Over to you, Rachel, with the next question.
Great. So I'm going to just say one more time. The last question for today is, how can we co-design new rites of passage that maintain the powerful content our ancestors perfected, but in new forms more suited to the present, and that better serve the needs and situations of today's modern youth? And what advice do you have to other communities or peoples who might be interested in reviving or reinventing meaningful rites of passage in their own context?
I'm happy to jump in on that. So the question got me thinking a lot about what's already trying to happen. You know, what are we already, what's the kind of consensus reality in different places for what we're already intentionally doing to support young people to cross the threshold into adulthood. And I really believe taking an assets-based approach to these kinds of things, so really looking at what's already trying to happen and supporting that, and maybe supporting that to grow in awareness of what it's growing in awareness around that. Or so I guess in my context, working with schools, they already do lots around the academic stuff to support a young person's perspective on life and to give them life-affirming experiences, and often they are quite tokenistic. Like they'll send kids off on a bus to go and have a trip somewhere, and then they'll come back, and that will be the end of that. So actually, it's like, if they're already doing that, why not look at how those experiences could be enhanced, and how the community support back in the school could be, could be supported. I think, for me, the wisdom that's always been there with Rites of Passage is around eldership and community, and the more we can do to support healthy elders and healthy communities, I think the rest will happen. Rites of Passage for me now, there's an opportunity around particularly around social justice. And hearing what's coming up in the chat is a really potent reminder that there's so much trauma and pain that's just goes so unacknowledged, and perpetuates these vicious cycles of unhealthy relationships. And I think rites of passage experiences can be because they are community oriented, they're intergenerational, they're about leaning into the shadows, leaning into the darkness, and looking for the gems at the bottom of the ocean. It's that doing that collectively is incredibly therapeutic work. And I think talking circles as just a simple practice that because we run a training in hosting council, and feels like just simple practices like that it's not complicated to do it, and that feels like everyone with a bit of support can bring that into their setting, and that really gives a young person agency, gives the participants or those involved a sense of, okay, I'm really accepted here, I can really bring what's true for me, and through that be supported by peers who are maybe slightly older. This also got me thinking about how siloed we grow up in the West, and we're in our age groups, and there's not much peer on peer support. So there's that would have been a very natural part of initiatory processes. I won't take up more time than that.
Thank you, Max.
I will go next. When I try to think about what's the role of the rites of passage in the first place, and embedded in that, the quest that Naomi talked about in terms of linking to our ancestral lineages and bringing it forward today. And also talking to men who've gone through their rites of passage, and hearing stories of how there's some woundedness in there when they recognize that it was a system that separated them from the larger community, but brought them together as men, but then diminishing anything else that wasn't male and stuff like that. I think that in designing rites of passage moving forward, and I like the fact that you use the word co-design, because the danger of creating something that is brought then to people, and you're told this is what you need to do to move from this stage to the next, I think that is dangerous. Mm-hmm. And when I look at the challenges that the youth are going through now, they are very different than the kind of things that our ancestors were building. But when I look at the overall picture of what the kind of human person that we want to grow or to mature, it was really to bring together or to ensure that the society grows or matures in certain directions, so that there is a wholeness in what's the word? There's a wholeness, a unity in the kind of community that we create. And so for me, I feel that even in the rites of passage, programs that we are creating now, we create them not from a desk, but by talking with young people and finding what is important for them, what kind of people, what are the kind of issues that they would like to understand, so that as they step into adulthood, these are the kinds of values that they would like to pass on to their children and things like that. And so co-creation is very important. Part of the rites of passage understanding for me is maintaining the interconnectedness and interdependence of our community, like building Ubuntu within the community. And so what are the values that enhance our Ubuntu? And beyond the Ubuntu part of it, that is, I am because you are, and because you are, we are, it is, what's the Utu-ness? What's the humaneness that enables that Ubuntu community cohesion and unity to take place? So, and because the old ways of rites of passage were separating women and separating men, I think there is an invitation now to go beyond that separation and see what is it that brings us all together as a human family that will enhance our families, our communities, and our global connectedness. And so for me, those are the things that I'm looking at now. And so it's not a one person or one age group kind of thing. It's even we can learn. We need to learn from children. Children see more and feel more than adults because they haven't been polluted or conditioned and programmed. And nature too should be our school of learning. And that is where I am looking for inspiration to create regeneration. I'm creating now regenerative rites of passages, and how they look like is another story, but for another day. So Rachel will have to create another event like this one so that we can talk about that. But thank you.
Well, Dr. Karambo, I hope some more of those details come out in the question and answer session, because I'm sure everyone here is quite eager to hear about that. Hugo or Naomi, who would like to go? Looks like Hugo is ready.
Yes. Very good to hear from the doctor. For me, it's the same. We cannot just say that I feel ridiculous that you try to create or design rites of a passage only. Because if you have such a good experience with so many injured people, for us, at least you should starting from a pluralistic framework that is recognized with the different knowledge system and the world vision. And to think it is possible that we can, for me, yes, I have many set up knowledge system, not only the modern one, but it seems that you have a presumption that only one knowledge system, only one value system, or only, you say, human rights or something is universal or something. But the diversity, vitality, and humanity, yeah, this is together. So before we are discussing about designing a meaningful rites of passage for the younger generation, you should look back how you can build or create such things in a bare land that is, I say, there's a destructive area. So first, I will suggest that yes, you should creating for modern peoples the intentional conserved territories of life with the same embeddedness and connectedness in depth. So this is a critical initiative deserving for a serious try. From this, because even a passage of rights cannot have its own living knowledge system, its own land and sea ethic value system, or you can say there's a belief system, because this is the way we understand how much you understand you to the interspecies habitats. What is your relationship to all beings around you? Do you feel them? Do you interact with them? Such things. If we have only one, and all these things for us when I have it, then I know that even I'm dropped out from the urban, from the industry, from anything, from any job, I can make a living. Say I can find my roots to thrive in my homeland. So we should rethinking. Yeah, the doctor is also say it's beautiful, but for us, yeah, this is common sense. You cannot just create a passage of rites of passage based on the schizophrenia of the industrial civilization, the alienation, the everything, the destruction, the corruption. How can you do it? But the world is for us is still such a rich and full of possibility for, I say, the trinity of language, culture, and the biological diversity. Now they are talking about conserving the biological diversity. Then they wipe out the language. Then they do not care about the culture. But for us, yeah, first a pluralistic framework to embrace it, and the human creativity. Yeah, many things were emerging again, were evolve again. You were, I think, for personal knowledge, you also learn or create so many knowledge to live on this world, or beside this world, or beyond this world. So for us, as interpeople, as tribal activists, of course, we are trying to make our own dimension and our own space to live beyond the state and the market. And this is a serious, this is a big challenge. But yes, we are still alive, so that some young people will see this is possible. So the same in the future, the indigenous way and the intentional conserve. Also, you can do it intentionally, and you can try to create the embeddedness and the connectedness. You will find it, and you will find your value, your meaning, your knowledge, your understanding. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hugo. I feel so touched by your words every time you talk. Naomi. Are you there? Looks like your computer froze. Can you hear us? While we're waiting for her, I'll say one thing, which is that my teacher, Martine Prechtel, wrote a book called Long Life, Honey in the Heart, which is also all about rites of passage. And one of his main points is that in a real rite of passage, you marry yourself first to the holy in nature as your first husband or your first wife. And then you don't ask so much of your human wife or husband, because you understand that they're just human. And you go to your first wife or husband as the core love of your life, which I think speaks a lot to the embeddedness and connectedness that Hugo was talking about. Hey, Naomi, you're back. Great. Go ahead.
Yeah, as I was saying, I would first go into the roots, as I was talking about earlier, stories of our ancestors, and thinking about it, of the traumas that we might be carrying because of all these rites of passages that we have been through. And then looking at what is my awareness around that trauma that I faced or someone else faced during their own rites of passage. And if I see the things that I'm now aware of that I wasn't aware of during that process, then what can I want to do to change that process that made me feel pain or unworthy or not really necessary what I wanted to resonate with. But then at the same time, also when I am going to co-create this new rites of passage, I want to engage my parents. I want to engage the two beings who brought me up to understand that there's this particular rites of passage that I went through, and it made me feel this way and changed different aspects of my life. And I am taking that and I want to heal from that so that I can be able to move forward into this new being that I am looking for. And so for me, mine is always going back into the things that are stopping us from fully becoming who we are, from the things that happened to us in the past. And with that, there's a new way of being that we can co-create our own rites of passages that are more, are more, I'm thinking in Swahili right now, but that are more engaging, they're more making me to become the woman that I am. And so I would also not give an advice to the people who are organizing rites of passage in this modern life, but I would just comment and say that young people are not always wanting to be pushed into doing things. They're always wanting to be shown how to do things. And so if we are directed into the right direction of how to go by in the new way of life, then I'll be really willing to open my heart, my mind into that. But if I'm forced or pushed to do something because it was done before I was born, then I won't be ready to do it. And so why don't we just go back into the young people and ask them, what do you really want to see in your own rites of passage? And then you can collectively do it despite the gender, despite the age, but just do it to celebrate one another. And so for me, that is how I see it.
Oh, so beautiful. I would love to keep asking you questions, but I'm going to open it up to the floor. Samira, I turn it over to you to call on people and just Naomi, I can't help myself. I'm coming from Sonoma County earlier this week, where a good friend of mine is helping to design a rite of competency for a 9-year-olds. There's this resurgence around here of like 8 or 9-year-old rites of passage, where these children, they're still children, are helped to do something that prove their competency. And then they have to like cross a river or do something that's like age appropriate. And then they're honored for their skills as a child, their child skills, and then they come back to a community of adults and elders who honors them for the child they're growing into. And so for me, I just love this idea, like ask the children, like, what would it be to show how competent you are? How would you like to be initiated into the next level of your maturation? So I will leave it there. I'm so excited by this topic. I apologize for perhaps talking too much. Samira, I hand it over to you.
Wow, thank you everyone for all those reflections. It's been deeply moving, and it's been going in the chat as well, with people chiming in with their own experiences, and lots of books and resources being shared as well, which we can send out later. There's one question which has come through from Oana, which relates really deeply to the last question that you asked, Rachel. And so Oana says, I love Martin Prechtel's writing and love that notion of marrying yourself first. This answers a bit of a question I wanted to ask around queerness and rites of passage, as so many traditions I know of, including from Romania, where Oana is from, truthfully from mine as well, where I'm from, are along a very heteronormative narrative. So marriage between men and women, child rearing, and I've always wondered about whether it was always this way, or if possibilities for belonging for queer people were lost along the way as well. Ayeba Enemi then went on to ask as well about transness and rites of passage, because there's definitely a history of transgender and queer rites of passage in pre-colonial Africa. So I'd love to hear what the panel has to, what their thoughts are about this.
This is Karambu. I really am not, I I haven't talked to someone about that aspect in terms of like my grandmother, to hear what she said about queer and gay persons in the community, but I know that they were there and they were part of the community. Modernity has just created a lot of linearity and separation, othering others. But within the African context, there was an acceptance and acknowledging of the diversity that we are as a community. And I remember recently actually reading somewhere that there was a word for people who are not, for people who are queer, and they were given a special, it was a special naming that marked them as special, and that they needed to be actually protected, because that uniqueness enabled or opened up ways that the gods or God communicated with them and stuff like that. So it's in modernity that we have created this separation, and we don't look at the humanity of a person, but we start othering people from whatever it is that human beings have created. So I would love to attend one of these rites of passages to just learn and see how different that would be from a mindset that is so heterosexual in orientation, because that is what has been pushed in the minds of the people through Christianity and through education and these kinds of things. But I think the invitation now is to start unlearning some of the conditionings that we have gotten ourselves into, and start relearning ways that enhance the humaneness of everybody, whether they are, in spite of the differences that we have as people in our communities. I think that diversity needs to be celebrated, and everybody's voice listened to and used as a tool, a powerful tool from which all of us can learn, grow, and evolve. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Or should we move on to the next question? I think Dr. Karambu or Naomi spoke about merging boys and girls initiations into one, and creating rites of passage for the humans that we'd like to be raising up for the next generation. And I think that's also a really exciting option, right? Like, why do we have to separate girls from boys? Because there's a core humanity and core values, like Dr. Karambu talked about. Like, what are the core values we want to inculcate to the next generations, regardless of whatever their gender is? So I think that's also another possibility I wanted to bring out. Anyone else have any ideas?
Thank you, Dr. Karambu, for the reflection on that. That's definitely a starting point. And there's also some comments in the chat about Spirit of Intimacy by Sobonfu Some, where there's a section about queer community honored as the gatekeepers of the physical and spiritual realm. So that I love that invitation to keep exploring that. And Ama Josephine, also apologies if I've mispronounced your name, is also talking about the rites of passage that queer people create for themselves as they move through. So it's relates a lot to some of the earlier questions that Max touched on as well. And in terms of creating rites of passage for yourself, so this was a question from Ama Josephine Baj. Would the rites of passage you're each involved in creating be relevant and applicable for adults? Are we not always growing, evolving, stepping into new phases and modes of being? I would love to hear what the panel would have to say about that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think the content, it feels like there's certain universal forms that can be used in different ways that can apply cross-culturally and cross-age, and that a community supporting each other through a transformative process has existed for as long as we've gathered around fires, I think. And yeah, I think again it speaks to what's coming in the chat around cultural appropriation too, because I think there is a lot of, we live in such a globalized world where and in such a future facing world where we often don't look back and consider where our practices or traditions have really come from. And for me, I think the mixing genders together, exploring gender identity in ways that is appropriate for young people now. There's so much adults can learn from young people around that, and in this very multicultural, globalized way, we've got to use the tools that are available to us to really create greater intergenerational integration and intercultural integration. So I'm thinking about how technology is quite often in the rites of passage world, technology is quite seen as the enemy. And actually there's, if it's about celebrating our uniqueness and our stories and giving ourselves a platform from which to tell our stories and to celebrate what is unique about us, actually technology is such a fantastic tool for that. But obviously needs to used carefully.
I want to really bring out the cultural appropriation question in our last 10 minutes here, and also to bring up the idea that we talked about in some of our preparatory calls about the ways that Christianity and organized formal religions shame rites of passage, particularly in Africa, and as like a satanic revival of ancestral pieces. I wrote an op-ed, a blog that I would love if people from Diversity Foundation, Global Diversity Foundation, can share in the chat about the need for all of us to dig really deeply in our ancestry, to find our own rituals and ceremonies rather than appropriate them from other cultures. And part of that, and the reason I'm bringing these two pieces together, is that Christianity and organized religions do so much shaming of our indigenous ancestral paths. Even just talking about Max's culture, I read an incredible book by a woman named Amanda Scott called Boudica, and she's done enormous research to find out about the indigenous tribal British people of the islands before they were invaded. And so much of white violence is because the white people were themselves once tribal and brutally had their culture brutally destroyed. So they've passed it on around the world. And so and the shaming of indigeneity and the shaming of the ancestral ways. And so I wonder, like, how do we create rites of passage that are not stealing from today's indigenous people? It's a serious, like, very violent phenomenon, the appropriation. So how do we make rites of passage that are not violent and appropriating? And how do we make rites of passage that champion our own indigenous roots, even in the face of shame from organized religions? Hugo, yes.
Yes, I would want to respond, because you also have a question about the traumatic elements of the previous rites of passage. In Taiwan, one of the very important parts of the indigenous culture is the tradition of head hunting, and this is being prohibited 100 years ago when Japanese come in. So yeah, we talk so much or deeply into the men and the women, but also life and death. It's very, this is a way our ancestors so deeply feel it. You know that the headhunter is not the cruel people. And this is, of course, sometimes this is also say like a revenge, but mostly this is for ritual. So when the spring we are starting the millet growing, we need the land to have the vitality. We borrow. I think that the shaman will give us idea, the function, the direction, and he will describe the likeness of this, the people you are going to take, and then the young people will come out, youth group will come out to take it. So this is also the second part of the initiation. Yeah, you take the first head back. Of course, you also will be take also. So hunting, animal hunting and the head hunting, they are all good hunter. So now in the modern world that the say in the Mangayao, the current Katarpur, they will held it in next week. Called yeah, this is the boys group of Takuban to enhance to be to the Parakuan of youth group. And traditional, they will go hunting monkey as a preparation for in the future they will be a headhunter. It needs much, of course, it's gone. And then in the modern way, the village use a straw mock-up of a monkey. We even do the hunting monkey because in Taiwan now you even do not that the young people are of this 12 or 13 or something to go to these things, or they okay, they also forget it. They cannot even slaughter a pig or something. But this, for our experience, this is so important. We also respect our animal, the wild animal. We also respect the head we take back. He is also his spirit with us. It needs many. I think for us this is, but this tradition is very important for us when we are training the tribal activist. I say go in this way. Of course, now we don't do the balanced way because this is not a way that or a good way to even go against the colonial government. But the spiritual power and the ability, I say, to take the strategic action. Yeah, we still have so much revelation from the oldest story about a headhunter. I cannot go detail, but yes, life and death, the violence is a very important part of it. And now you say that we should not do, you should look into it, and then you can see that yeah, how we can transform it, how we can have some creative meta interpretation about it to better that we can still have got the spiritual power, but we are living in the modern world.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Hugo. Last words from Max, Naomi, or Dr. Karambu.
The only thing I'd like to say is, you know, if someone hasn't tried something, they can't really understand it. So unless these people who are shaming or diminishing rites of passages, unless they try it and see the practices, that's when they'll understand and stop talking negatively about it. But if you see them talk about that, it's just that they haven't really tried it and they don't know about it, and they're afraid to even go there and try it for the image of what they'll be told they are, and or maybe going outside the Christianity religion practice, you know. So it is upon us to say yes into trying before judging and naming, and then, you know, the rest will follow.
Thank you, Naomi.
I know we're on time, end of the time, but I'm just really overjoyed at seeing everything that's coming in the chat and how much the allyship that is in this space. And quite often, you know, at least in the UK, the Rites of Passage world feels quite disconnected from one another, and everyone's kind of doing their thing in their silos. And yeah, I just really wanted to appreciate the space for connection and wonder about how that grows and continues beyond this space. Feels like there's a lot of cross-cultural learning and wisdom being shared that is feels very unique.
Thank you, Max. Dr. Karambu, you get to finish us off strong.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. A lot of us who've been converted into Christianity don't understand that if you look back into the history of Christianity, it has a lot of what is it called? Indigenous rituals and things in them, but no one questions those things and stuff like that. I won't go into that. I will only say that for me as an African, there is a lot of remembering and reclaiming that I need to do to go back to my roots, because now I am uprooted in this modernistic religion, the capitalism and all this stuff. When I'm grounded, I'll be able to figure these new ways of being from a more grounded place, not from kind of lost space. And then lastly, let us remember that the reason why we were brought here on this earth, I believe the reason why I came was to serve a cause larger than myself, to live in community, to make community more beautiful. Life is very simple, but we have complicated it with so many things that are adding more pain. I think the bottom line is whatever rites of passage we create, they need to build love and they need to return us to love, because that is all there is. Whether we remember through ancestors or whether we step into modernity, all there is love. And whatever I do needs to bring back that remembering. And once we are in that space of we are love, then we remember we come from the same conscience. We come from the same essence. We are one, and that is all that matters. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That couldn't have been a better final word to this panel. Samira, how would you like to end?
Just with a lot of gratitude. Thank you, everyone, and everyone who is present as well in talking in the chat and bringing in their own experiences from everywhere. I can't top what Dr. Karambu has said. So I will offer another invitation. Next Tuesday, we're having the Gen Grove, which is a sharing circle that we have every month. And the next one on Tuesday is going to be on ecological grief. So if that resonates with everyone, please sign up, and we'd love to share there. And also seeing how generative this conversation has been, we would love to continue the conversation on rites of passage, and I would please stay in touch via sign up to our newsletter, and you'll be aware of future events on rites of passage and other Global Environments Networks events that come up. Thank you, everyone, with immense gratitude. Rachel, you were brilliant moderating. Max, Naomi, Dr. Karambu, Sutta Chugu, thank you so much. Lots of love to everyone.